Imagine you're the most feared warrior in all of France. You have 80,000 men at your back and are holed up in an impregnable fortress atop a hill. You look down and see Julius Caesar arriving with a smaller army. You smile because you think, I have him cornered. But 2 weeks later, you wake up to realize you are not in a fortress. You are in a cage. Caesar hasn't come to fight you. He has come to build an 18-kilometer prison around you. Welcome to Alesia, the craziest siege in history. It is 52 BC. Vercingetorix, the rebel leader of Gaul, has achieved the impossible, uniting all the tribes against Rome. He takes refuge in the city of Alesia, a perfect position, elevated with water and supplies. He expects Caesar to make the mistake of attacking uphill, which would be a tomb for the Roman legions. But Julius Caesar was no ordinary general. He was an engineer in armor. Upon arriving and seeing the hill, he says, I can't go up. Fine, then you won't come down. This is where Caesar's logic blows everyone's mind. Instead of sitting and waiting, he orders his 50,000 legionaries to dig. In record time, the Romans build the Contravallatio, a circular wall 18 kilometers long that completely surrounds the city. Watchtowers every few meters. Deep trenches, some filled with water diverted from nearby rivers. Fields of traps. They buried sharpened stakes, which the soldiers called Lilies, and iron caltrops to shred the feet of anyone trying to slip out at night. Vercingetorix watches from the city wall and sees how, day after day, a ring of wood and iron appears, separating them from the world. Caesar has turned the battlefield into a giant construction zone. The 80,000 Gauls are trapped. No food can get in, and soon, no hope can get out. But just when it seems Caesar has victory in his pocket, his spies bring him news that chills his blood. Vercingetorix managed to send a message before the wall was sealed. The result? A massive relief army of over 250,000 Gauls from other tribes is on its way to crush the Romans from behind. Caesar now has a deadly mathematical problem. 80,000 hungry enemies in front of him and 250,000 furious warriors coming from behind. He is trapped in his own siege. Caesar is in the center of a death sandwich. If he keeps staring at Alesia, he'll be killed from behind. If he turns to fight the relief force, Vercingetorix will come out and annihilate him from within. His solution? Do something so absurd his own generals thought he had gone mad. Build a second wall, turning his back to the first. Caesar is about to invent the Iron Doughnut. You have your opponent cornered. You're about to deliver checkmate. And suddenly, you look out the window and see 20 of your rival's cousins arriving in the garden with baseball bats. That is exactly what Julius Caesar felt. He went from being the besieger to the besieged in a matter of hours. He was about to become the filling in the bloodiest sandwich in history. The news lands like a bomb in the Roman camp. A Gallic relief army, a human tide of 250,000 warriors, is approaching. Let's do the math quickly. Inside Alesia, 80,000 hungry but desperate Gauls. Outside Alesia, 250,000 fresh and furious Gauls. In the middle, Caesar with just 50,000 legionaries. Any sensible general would have ordered an immediate retreat. Staying meant being crushed on two fronts at once. But Caesar was not any general. He knew that if he retreated, the Gallic rebellion would last forever. If he stayed and won, he would gain everything. Caesar gives an order that sounds like a joke. If one wall protects us from those inside, let's build another to protect us from those outside. Thus, the Circumvallatio was born. They build a second line of fortifications 21 kilometers in circumference, facing outward. Between the inner wall and the outer wall lay a circular corridor where the Romans lived, slept, and fought. The Iron Doughnut. Caesar literally locked himself in a bubble. He was inside a prison of his own design, built to protect him from the outside world. Roman legionaries were not just soldiers. They were elite laborers. They dug trenches 6 meters deep and raised palisades with hidden traps, while listening to the drums of the approaching relief army in the distance. The atmosphere in this corridor of death was suffocating. The Romans had to ration food because they couldn't leave to gather supplies. They were surrounded by a wall of wood, and beyond it, a horizon bristling with enemy spears. Caesar constantly patrolled the walls. He knew that if the two Gallic armies coordinated an attack simultaneously, one from the city and one from the field. His defenses would shatter like glass. The hunter now lived in a cage. The stage was set. On one side, the greatest hero of Gaul waiting for the moment to break out. On the other side, an endless horde ready to charge. And in the middle, Caesar, trapped in his own invention, knowing the first mistake would be the last. But what happens when a human tide crashes against the wall? Get ready, because the final battle was not decided by tactics, but by sheer terror and a red cloak. Ever felt like you're between a rock and a hard place? Now multiply that by 1,000,000. Caesar's legionaries weren't just afraid. Their hands were blistered. Instead of running for their lives, they dug as if there were no tomorrow. They built a 21-kilometer death trap and then voluntarily stepped inside. They were about to turn a siege into the most claustrophobic defense in military history. Imagine the scene. You're standing in a corridor just a few hundred meters wide. To your left, a wall enclosing 80,000 hungry Gauls. To your right, another wall separating you from 250,000 warriors coming to cut off your head. The Romans didn't just live there. They slept with their shields on. The sound of Gallic drums came from everywhere. It was constant psychological warfare. Caesar knew that if his men turned to face one side, the other side would swarm over the wall. To compensate for being outnumbered nearly 7-1, Caesar ordered the space in front of the walls to be filled with traps worthy of a horror movie. The soldiers, with their dark Roman humor, gave them names. Lilies, camouflage pits with sharpened stakes at the bottom. If you fell in, you were dead. Wooden blocks with iron hooks that would pierce the feet of anyone trying to run toward the wall. Double trenches. One was filled with water diverted from local rivers, so enemy cavalry would sink before reaching the palisade. Suddenly, the silence shatters. The external relief army lets out a war cry that shakes the earth and charges the outer wall. At the same time, inside the city, Vercingetorix sees a signal and orders his 80,000 men to pour out and attack the inner wall. The Roman legion split. Some face inward, others outward. It's a 360-degree battle. The Romans have to fight back-to-back. There's no rear, nowhere to flee. If the wall breaks at a single point, Caesar's entire army will be swallowed by the Gallic tide. The sky darkened with arrows. The Gauls began filling the trenches with earth and corpses to cross over. At that moment, Caesar realized his walls were about to collapse. Engineering was no longer enough. Someone had to go out there and pull off a desperate move to change the fate of Rome. The problem? To turn the tide, Caesar would have to stake his own life on a do-or-die charge. You are exhausted, covered in mud and blood, and you watch as thousands of giant warriors breach your wall. You're about to drop your sword and accept the end. But suddenly, amid the smoke, a flash of fiery red appears. It's not a fire. It's the cloak of Julius Caesar. At that moment, the Romans knew they weren't going to die. They knew they were going to win. The siege of Alesia reached its breaking point. The Gauls had found a weak spot in the outer wall and were pouring in like a black tide. The Romans, outnumbered 7-1, were seconds from breaking. That's when Caesar made his masterstroke of courage and presence. He put on his bright red cloak, the plumentum, the sign that the general was on the field. He didn't stay in a tower giving orders. He climbed down into the mud, drew his gladius, and charged into front line. When his soldiers saw that flash of red moving among the enemy, something shifted in their minds. Panic turned to fury. If the man who is about to rule the world is here fighting like a common soldier, we cannot fail. While Caesar fought on the wall, he sent his Germanic cavalry out through a hidden gate to attack the Gauls from behind. The Gauls, who believed victory was within reach, suddenly found themselves ambushed. What won Alesia was not strength, but Roman discipline. While the Gauls fought as brave but disorganized individuals, the Romans fought as a machine of flesh and iron. By nightfall, the Gallic relief army had evaporated. They had fled, leaving Vercingetorix alone on his hill, watching his dream of a free Gaul sink into silence. The next day, the gates of Alesia opened. Vercingetorix, the greatest hero France had ever known, put on his finest armor, mounted his warhorse, and rode to Caesar's camp. In a gesture still studied today, He circled Caesar's throne, dismounted, removed his armor, and cast his weapons at the Romans' feet. He did not speak a word. It was that silence which marked the end of the dominant Celtic culture in Europe. From that day on, Gaul would cease to exist, becoming instead France, a Roman province. Caesar had achieved the impossible, conquering an entire country with a wooden donut. Alesia was not just a battle. It was a birth certificate of the Roman Empire. Caesar was now the most powerful man in history, with an army that worshipped him like a god.